Let's go now to the foyer of the House of Commons. That's where we'll find three MPs who were listening to Jody Wilson-Raybould today and questioning her this afternoon. Randy Boissonnault is an Alberta Liberal MP on the Justice Committee. Lisa Raitt is the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. And Murray Rankin is the Justice Critic for the NDP. It's good to see you all.
Thanks, Peter.
Late night here in the nation's capital after a long day on Parliament Hill. Mr. Boissonnault, let me start with you. How troubled are you by the testimony you heard today from Jody Wilson-Raybould?
Well, look, we had a more than 30-minute opening statement from Ms. Wilson-Raybould, 4 hours of testimony. I think she was able to share her perspective on the matter fulsomely. I think when I asked the question, had the Prime Minister or the Clerk ever directed her to enter into a remediation agreement with SNC-LAVALIN, the clear answer was no. And then we heard a lot of conversation about political conversations. And I think what's clear from the questions that we asked is that there were conversations that took place that were within the scope of looking into the public interest. We're talking about thousands and thousands of jobs on the line, and so legitimate conversations to see if there were scenarios or possibilities for those jobs to be preserved so that innocent employees, pensioners, and suppliers wouldn't be on the hook for the criminal wrongdoings of a few corporate execs.
She painted a lengthy narrative here with a number of, 11 people, 10 phone calls, 10 meetings that wouldn't let up. She's the Attorney General of Canada. She says that was pressure. It was not reasonable. Not sure she said it was criminal. She stopped short of saying that, but she clearly said it was inappropriate. And if direction wasn't stated, it sure sounded like it was implied. Do you believe her?
I believe that she feels that way about what took place. Look at Mr. Warnick's testimony. The job of being a cabinet minister is pressure. That's what the job is. And you're constantly having conversations with colleagues about files, about matters, about the public interest. And in this case, it was an important file for obvious reasons. And the Prime Minister was clear that it was Ms. Wilson-Raybould's call.
What do you think Mr. Warnick meant, if you believe her testimony? What do you think Mr. Warnick meant when he said the Prime Minister's really determined on this? He's going to find a way to do it. I just thought you should know that. What does that mean?
Well, I can't comment on that part of the testimony. I wasn't in that room. What I can say is that it was very clear that neither the Prime Minister nor the Clerk ever directed her to go into a remediation agreement with SNC-LAVALIN. And its direction is the line that's too far, Peter. Everything else is a legitimate conversation in public policy.
Okay, we're going to hear at length from Jody Wilson-Raybould. In fact, all of her testimony at the committee coming up in just a bit. Lisa Raitt, what to you about what you heard today? And I know your leader's saying that the Prime Minister needs to resign over this. Yeah. What's happened here that you think that has to happen?
I think what the former Attorney General has done for us is she's set out and indeed expressed her concern that there was attempted political interference in the decision of the Attorney General on an issue that was very important, meaning the issue of a criminal court case that was ongoing as of the end of October of 2018. And while she didn't say that it was illegal, the point is it's not her situation to say that it's illegal. In fact, what she puts forward are the facts, and investigations will turn up who is to be believed and who's not to be believed. And from there, charges, if any are warranted, would be laid. So it makes complete sense to me that she wouldn't allege that it was criminal behavior, because for her, she's just telling what happened, and the facts will speak to whether or not charges will be laid. And that's why we want the RCMP to look at it. And secondly, because it's such a fundamental breach of trust between Canadians and the executive part of our power here in Canada, meaning that they politically tried to interfere with a criminal court proceeding, Canadians should expect more from their Prime Minister, and as a result, he should resign.
Mr. Rankin, what did you hear today that convinced you that what's happened here is more than, as the Prime Minister has put it, and Mr. Boissonnault and those around, they make the argument that, look, this is about defending jobs and applying pressure that's lawful, pressure that's appropriate to try and find a way for SNC-LAVALIN to escape a criminal prosecution, which is allowed to them under a deferred prosecution agreement. What did you hear today that convinced you that what happened was going too far?
I heard that the former Attorney General felt that relentless, continued pressure came at her from everywhere, from the Clerk of the Privy Council, where she felt threatened, from people who are the right-hand people of the Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's office, taking her out, telling her what the boss wants. And she said, you know what, I've made my mind up. It's my job to make up my mind. And Okay, maybe she wasn't directed to do that, but she was, by all the surrogates of the Prime Minister, told over and over again that there would be consequences, and you know what? There were. She was gone from the cabinet right after Christmas.
So, Mr. Boissonnault, I guess that for people watching today, and one of the things I wondered is listening to the narrative over the last couple of weeks and watching what happened with Jody Wilson-Raybould and then Mr. Lametti taking over in cabinet. I mean, a lot of people will try and connect those dots, and it makes me wonder why don't we just say that? Why don't we say that we did appropriate pressure on her, she wouldn't change her mind, wouldn't intervene, we got somebody who will?
Well, I think you heard very clearly from the clerk of the Privy Council that this was lawful advocacy. I mean, these are going to be emotional files, Peter. People, the 9,000 jobs at stake, and you preserve the rule of law. The law is there. Look, the law as it's written, and even if you take a look at the prosecutor's handbook, which I've looked at as a non-lawyer, it says very clearly that a prosecutor needs to do continual assessment and always keep their mind open, and there should not ever be a final decision. Until the actual case is closed, there should be no final decision, and she didn't keep her mind open on this.
Okay, so that's an admission that she wasn't doing the job the government needed to do. So we're agreeing tonight that she got shuffled out of Justice portfolio and Attorney General because she wouldn't do the job the government felt needed to be done.
We're not agreeing to anything, Peter. You know that the decisions. Look,
so do you still
you know how this place works.
I know. I'm just telling you. Do you still maintain that she wasn't shuffled out of the Justice portfolio and Attorney General? Had nothing to do with the position she took on SNC-LAVALIN.
I think you heard very clearly from the testimony from Mr. Warnick that there are many reasons that go into a cabinet shuffle, and in this case, it is true that what Mr. Trudeau would have been balancing was having somebody from Nova Scotia, making sure there was gender balance there, and also making sure that there would be a new Treasury Board Secretariat. And we asked Ms. Wilson-Raybould about accepting that position. She took an oath. She accepted the Veterans Affairs Ministry. She was happy to do so. She was honored to do so. And there are many reasons that go into a shuffle, none of which I'm privy to. I'm taking this entirely from Mr. Warnick's testimony.
All right, Lisa Raitt, your leader is suggesting the Prime Minister should resign. He's having none of that. What happens next here?
What happens, I'm sorry?
What happens next?
What happens next?
Yeah.
Well, we're going to continue with the process that we have. Obviously, the Prime Minister did not take our advice to resign this evening because he said he wasn't going to. But we have our Justice Committee, which has a Liberal majority. That is going to be difficult, I would say, to get the witnesses we like to come forward. I'd be more than happy if I were proved to be wrong, but we have a lot more witnesses we want to hear from. As well, we've made it clear that we think the RCMP should take a look at it. It's in their hands to take a look at it if they want to. I would submit that they should take a look at the testimony of Jody Wilson-Raybould today if they want to see whether or not there's any interference or intimidation of any officials who are associated with the justice system. As per the criminal code, that would be something interesting to take a look at. And finally, we're going to continue to ask questions in the House of Commons. This is an issue that is not going away, Peter. This is a very fundamental issue for Canadians. Canadians do care about it. And one last thing I would say, if this comes down to testimony and he said, she said, I will take the testimony of Jody Wilson-Raybould every single day over the testimony of the Clerk of the Privy Council, 100%.
Should SNC-LAVALIN get a deferred prosecution?
I think it's an irrelevant question. I'll tell you why. Because the former Attorney General said that she discharged her duty fully. She was well briefed. She understood exactly what her duty was. She understood the parameters. She understood the legalities. And she said they should not get one. And she would not overturn the decision. So I think that ship has sailed. And if Mr. Lametti decides he's going to grant it, I think that's going to have to be something that a Canadian Gazette will take a look at. The public will know about it. But certainly, there is a lot of cloud over this kind of decision right now. Policy-wise, that is an issue that is going to be debated within our committee, and we'll probably have some recommendations. The minister was happy we were studying those kinds of things. But this particular issue, I think we have clear testimony from the Attorney General saying it's inappropriate. All right,
Mr. Rankin, where do we go from here? You tried to get a motion passed at the committee today that would broaden the waiver for Jody Wilson-Raybould so she could talk about the time
after she was removed as Attorney General.
And before she left cabinet.
And guess what? It was voted down by the Liberals.
What are you trying to? What do you think you could get at by allowing her to do that? What do you think? What more do you think we need to hear?
I'll tell you one thing that happened after that. The long-standing Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, Mr. Jerry Butts, resigned, and in doing so talked about Jody Wilson-Raybould. It's never been clear why. And she won't, because she can't talk about those things. You read the testimony. Over and over again, she said, I can't talk about that because I'm only liberated from a certain part of history. I want a public inquiry. I want people to tell the truth under oath. I want to give them more than just a 3-minute question here and a 2-minute question there. This is too fundamental to our democracy, Peter. We got to get to the bottom of this.
All right. Thank you all for your time tonight, and we'll continue to follow this story. We'll get a chance to talk again, I'm sure. Thank you all.
Thanks, Peter.